Hello, everybody. Welcome to our latest event for If These Lands Could Talk. And we have a really interesting guest today, Mr. Conroy Obey. And Mr. Conroy is a seasoned Indigenous business owner with over 15 years of experience in the entrepreneurial world. He was born into the Nation,
Piapot. Sorry.
Piapot Nation in Treaty 4, and currently is based in Calgary, Alberta. And Conroy brings a very unique perspective as an Afro Indigenous individual, as a businessman, as a person who's straddling multiple worlds, so to speak. So, alongside being very successful in various business ventures, he's dedicated to mentoring youth, which is something really near and dear to both mine and Natasha's heart. And he shares his knowledge, he shares his expertise, with the hope of inspiring the next generation of leaders. So I'd like for all of us to welcome this passionate, driven, community-centered individual that's really committed to making, I don't know, the next generation of people have a positive impact in business and in mentoring. So welcome, Conroy, to this edition of If These Lands Could Talk, our Walking in Two Worlds fireside chat.
Thank you so much. I'm very pleased to be asked to be on your podcast, your fireside chat. I think If These Lands Can Talk is a great initiative. And I like that it's focused around technology and also business minded people with Indigenous backgrounds. So, yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely welcome Conroy Tao, and we're happy to have you. I think in terms of this larger conversation, we're focused really around this line between tradition and indigenous native tradition and modernity. We hear about this modern world all the time, and what does that really mean, and how does that impact Native and Indigenous communities and also businesses. Um, so I think we have a couple of really interesting topics to discuss here today.
Yes.
So
And I see that you have just returned from work or you're in the middle of working. So that's really great as you're representing, business owners. So nice to see
I
that.
know, but this is not my presentation outfit.
Yeah.
And so,
But it
I'm
looks
just
like you're
completing.
doing something. That's good. Yeah. It looks busy. So
Yeah.
that, yeah. Um,
Yes.
let's start, I think, with a kind of an easy and hard question. And what does it mean to be Indigenous or call yourself an Indigenous person?
Well, that's a great question, first of all, um, because there can be a lot of challenges for us who present um, to one nation more than the other. So I look primarily black. So, there's can be questions sometimes when I tell people, I'm a Cree man. That's the
Mm-hmm.
tribe that I come from. And so I was raised with all my people. I spent time on my reservation. I go back quite often. I go to ceremony. I have my spiritual name. So I'm very involved in the community. But when I tell a random stranger I'm native, it's just like, no, you're black,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And then we have in the business community and also just on the nations, we have this thing that's been going around, pretendianism is what they call it. And so it's this idea that there's non-indigenous people taking away from indigenous people, especially in business. So, for instance, there's a lot of grants and additional funding for Indigenous people.
Mm-hmm.
And in the past, there has been some unscrupulous people that pretend to be First Nations and they take that funding. And so that's been a very big problem. But what it's caused, though, is this idea that to be considered Indigenous, you need to present as Indigenous.
Now that's pretty, I think, significant to say. I can speak from my own background. I do have some Indigenous, I guess, ancestry,
Hmm.
but have really struggled I don't say accepting that is fine. I think it's wonderful. You accept all parts of yourself, but
Mhm.
calling myself Indigenous is something that I've struggled with. So, who has the right to call themselves Indigenous? Is there like you know, a one drop? We have the one drop rule as far as being Black in the United States, or is there some special something that makes you claim your indigeneity, your Indigenous part more than others?
That's been a question that's plagued me for a long time because, when it comes to doing business, we have to kind of switch back and forth, code switching. Um, and in some situations, it's more beneficial to present as a Black man because there's a lot of bias against First Nations people, especially in this country, in Canada here. So, and then it presents this problem for me because in my heart, I'm all Indigenous. And, it can be an issue. So I've talked to other people, especially in the Indigenous community and the business community, like, what is it to be Indigenous? And so, sometimes the consensus is you got to be 50%.
Mm-hmm.
The blood quantum is what they call it.
Mm-hmm.
I am 50%, but I don't think that's what should be, the determining factor. Another person told me that, as long as you are engaged in the culture,
Mm-hmm.
so you're learning about the culture, you're learning about the history, you're engaged in our struggles. So, you're coming for the walks, you're going to the community, you're going to ceremony,
Mm-hmm.
you're learning about your history.
Mm-hmm.
That should be more of a way for a person to identify themselves as Indigenous because they're putting in the effort to get to know what it is to be Indigenous.
Mm-hmm. So
And
you're
I would,
go ahead. I was saying you're interesting. You're bringing up this idea of the Indigenous part, but you have a lot of intersectionality, right? Because you're
yes,
not just Indigenous, you're Afro-Indigenous. So
yes.
how does it play out with people? Like you said, you're 50% Indigenous, 50% Black, but how does that work in your world? What does that look like? Especially if you present as a Black male until people start, chipping away. What is that existence feel like or look like?
Well, some of the negative aspects,
Mhm,
there is positive ones, but I'll start with the negative. Um, Sometimes I go to business meetings and, in Alberta, there's a lot of racism towards First Nations people. And in these business meetings, I can sense when that conversation is coming up, how the Indians get everything and they're lazy and all these things, right? So I always have to figure a unique way to just throw in the conversation, I'm half native,
mm,
so that way, if they do have any kind of jokes that they want to throw out there, any kind of racist things, they know that, like, I'm obviously going to be offended. And so that can be one of the challenging parts.
mhm,
Um, and then the whole idea, you're not native, you're Black.
mm,
It's like, well, do I have to have two braids and a feather hanging out and some war paint on for you to identify me as Indigenous?
yeah.
You know? And then one of the more positive things is how passionate I am about my culture. So even if you are someone who has some bias,
Mhm,
I will convince you, like, our people are strong
yeah.
because of the way I talk about my people,
Mhm,
how proud I am to be Indigenous,
mhm,
and that's one of the things that I get to do on a regular basis. I get to change the hearts and minds of people that are just ignorant,
mhm.
and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that they're just lack of knowledge.
Yeah. So speaking of being passionate about your culture and knowledgeable about your culture, I think many people will have noticed that we did not do a land acknowledgement at the beginning
Yes.
of this podcast. So how do you feel about land acknowledgements?
Um, it's mixed for me.
Mm,
I can appreciate that other nations across the world, especially in the Caribbeans, they don't get that kind of recognition to be recognized as people of that land.
mm,
And so for us here in Canada, we get that recognition on a regular basis.
Mm.
But from where I stand, um, it can be offensive in one way. It's like, like we were talking about the other day. I stole your car, I pull up to your house, and I'm really thanking you. Like, thank you. It's a great car. You've taken
Mm.
great care of it. You've maintained it well. In the past 2 years that I stole it from you, it's increased in value.
Mm.
And I just want to let you know, like, I really like the car that you've allowed me to take from you. And I want to acknowledge it's your car, but I'm going to drive away now.
Mm.
And so the thing is, it's like, when I hear politicians, say the land acknowledgement, I'm like, well, then stop fighting us when we're going to court to
Mm.
get our land back
Yeah.
and to get you to honor the treaties. Why would you fight us? Why would you make us go to court for like 5 to 10 years if you really care about that, acknowledging that this is our land? So for me, I don't like to do the land acknowledgement, um, especially as a First Nations person, an Indigenous person. Now, if you're someone that's not Indigenous, sure, at very least, you're acknowledging that this is our land and you understand that, but I don't think us Indigenous people, we should have to do that.
Okay. So now let's make a little switch. And we're here to talk about business, technology, and innovation.
Yes.
So let's talk about you as a business owner. Natasha, do you have any questions?
I think in where well, if these landscape talk is really focused around digital technology and how we can support Native and Indigenous communities with self-determination with these technologies, right? How do you use tech in a way that makes sense for your community, specifically digital technology, while still upholding your traditions, the goals that each community has and how they want to use it, right? So, in general, you have a business, and your business is in the world of construction, but
Yes.
technology and innovation is part of that conversation. So, can you kind of explain or discuss a little bit more about your experience as an Indigenous business owner, and how are you able to balance kind of like this tradition with culture and this modernity that we hear about the modern world with technology and innovation?
Yes. Well, in my experiences, as a First Nation entrepreneur, I do have a construction company, but I'm consistently working on other business ventures. Um, so for instance, in terms of technology, I think it was about 5 months ago, yeah, maybe 4 months ago, I created a podcast because I seen that our people, when it comes time for election times to elect a new chief, we're not really using technology to spread the word. Um, for instance, on our nation, there's 2,600 people that are registered, and I think there's only 1,500 people that live on the reserve. So there's about 1,000 of us that are living abroad, essentially. And so there's no real way for us to get information about who to vote for every 4 years. And so I seen a need, and then I was like, okay, well, this is how we use technology. Um, we download StreamYard, and we set up these online interviews of each candidate that's willing to come on. And, there was a lot of praise from the younger generation saying, like, okay, this is great. Like, finally, we're being heard, us that don't have access to being on the reserve to meet the people that we're going to vote for. Um, but we also had the elders saying this is not our way. This is not the way we do things traditionally. Um, so living in that world, it's trying to convince some of the older generation that yes, this is not traditional, but this is what we're left with because, we're living in this new modern world where a lot of us are far away. And you send us a mail in vote, but we don't even know the people we're voting for. So this way we can use technology to get to know the people that we want to cast a vote for. So that's one of the ways that I've used technology um, to and adapt a traditional process like voting for a chief.
And in terms of the code switching, because code switching is a big part of business. I mean, I'm also Indigenous as well. So,
Yes.
how you would operate in your own community or operate with other people who are Indigenous, even if they're not Indigenous in a cultural context, and then how you operate in, let's say, in a business setting, because right now you are on a job site, right?
Yes.
But you're not always on a job site. You may walk into an office. You may have to put on a suit sometimes. You may have to,
Yes.
right? So you're always like switching. You're code switching, not just in what you're saying, but in like your actions and how you dress and all this whole thing. So how are you able to how does code switching play a role for you in your multiple ventures in business and innovation?
I think that code switching um, is very important in business, especially if you're of mixed culture.
Hmm.
You have to know how to navigate, all the ins and outs. Sometimes as a black man, I need to be like aware that if I have a client or if I'm in a business meeting and someone is 70 or 80 years old, they have some really different thought processes. And so I have to know how to adapt to them, you know, how to show them different forms of respect, how to present myself, you know, how do I walk into the meeting? Um, and then there's also times where, I'm in a meeting with Indigenous clients. It's more relaxed, throw a little joke around, you know what I mean? 'Cause we like to joke around, we like to laugh. And sometimes in those settings, if you come in too serious, too prim and proper, you're not going to be received well because they'll receive you as a white man. So code switching is definitely important. And when I'm on larger construction sites and I deal with people, like sometimes we're working in an area that's a small town, it's a large house, we're doing a big project for them. And, I'm weary sometimes. Do I tell them I'm Indigenous? Because they might be like, oh, you're going to steal all my stuff, you know? But they'll trust a black man, no problem. But in terms of being Indigenous, they won't. So, um, to answer your question better, I think that code switching is very important in business. You have to know how to operate in those different fields. And, sometimes it can be detrimental to the businessman or the entrepreneur on a personal level because sometimes you feel like you have to suppress who you really are in order to get this contract or to make sure that the client is happy.
And in terms of actual like digital technologies or these
Hmm.
types of new emerging uh, innovations, like what types of technologies are digital technologies are you using in your business, and how do you think that has helped you on a business side to do the things that you want to do and meet the goals you want, but still staying true to your indigenous culture and tradition?
Um, so something like CRM programs, you know,
Hmm.
that's what I've used and I've used in the past as well. Um, that's a great tool, and it's something that a lot of indigenous business owners, especially on our nations, they just really haven't really adapted yet. It seems like it's too much work. We do things the old way. We phone calls, emails, and text messages. Um, but those things get lost, and it's a problem. In terms of like, how do I address that as a traditional Native man? Um, I think that's more of a personal thing. It's how do I operate with honor and integrity. So it doesn't matter what technology I'm using or whatever it is. And as an indigenous person, you're taught to have integrity. We, as a First Nation man, there's something called the seven sacred teachings. So it's how you're supposed to live your life and how you're supposed to be guided through your life. And it's important to consider all of those factors when you're doing business. I had an older lady. I wasn't communicating with her very well, and she gave me trouble. You know, and because of my traditions and being First Nations man, I had to sit there and listen to her and to remember the seven teachings. Me not showing up on time because I wasn't, looking at my files correctly. It was a disrespect to her, and so I have to be like, okay, yes. So yeah, that's kind of a harder question to answer. Like, how does tradition play a role with digital technology? For me, anyways.
And for those who are hearing the acronym CRM, just for clarification, CRM is customer relationship management software, and many times that's used to basically catalog your customers and streamline those relationships as you're making sales and engaging with clients in a business. So I think continuing on this kind of tech and innovation track, right?
But could I intervene for 1 second?
Sure, of course.
The same question you had for me, I'd like to ask you.
Okay. In terms of business, okay, so I'm in the world of a number of things, but I'm in the world of innovation. And here with If These Lines Could Talk, we're in the world of digital technology. I think in terms of tradition, a lot of it, I think, is focused on, for me, it's where I am in my journey as an Indigenous person. I'm Taino, and being Taino, we're in a different journey path than you are, for example, being Cree. The culture is not fully acknowledged in all these different aspects, and I am also from the Caribbean. So I think for us, at least for me, at this stage, it's more around understanding the culture, reconnecting with those values in the culture. Some of those values are around same things around kind of like respect, um, being a good person, those types of things, being respectful to your elders, um, and thinking ahead in the future, so that the decisions that you make today aren't only affecting today, but you're thinking ahead multiple generations. And so I think with that idea, how I bring that into business technology and the worlds of innovation are around how do we create more sustainability in the types of work we're doing, how we're applying to the digital technologies, and also asking the question: is digital right? And I love the world of tech and innovation, but these technologies aren't always right for your situation. So being mindful about that and applying those things where it makes sense. Like, for example, if we cannot access voting information, like the example you gave, and everything's on digital, it's like there's a point where it's like, okay, so how do we get on digital so that we can interact with the rest of the world, right? And I think that there are stages like that, but in a lot of communities, with the Taino, people are all over the place. There's no reserve that they go to, right? So that's one of the things that's different about my culture than yours. So it's kind of like, how do we stay connected? Digital for us is really important because then you can get in touch with somebody else that it may also be Taino, but they live somewhere completely different. Not just in the United States, they can live in Canada, they can live in Asia, they can live anywhere. So for our where we are, it's really important. But I think being able to look and see kind of where you are and then using that technology mindfully, sustainably, looking at data sovereignty, ensuring that as we're building, we're thinking about consent and alignment to those communities and their needs.
And I think if I step in with how I look at it is by helping communities to kind of go along with this data sovereignty area. How do they want to be represented in digital space or not? How do they want their artifacts to be seen by others, used by others, or not? So just giving people or educating people on how they can bridge this digital divide that's happening. How could they can use it to further their own agendas, and just giving them a voice as opposed to being used by other people. A lot of times, I was in Senegal working on a project a couple months ago, and we were talking to local peoples there that had been doing this kind of mud cloth work for millennia, right? And if you go into any home goods store, any TJ Maxx, whatever, you'll see these cloths with African print. And for most Americans, I can't speak for everybody, but for most Americans, it's just a pretty print that has some quote unquote tribal, ethnic. And you have the commercials where they're bringing all these things from around the world. But what they don't know is these are stories. All the symbols mean something to the people. And without knowledge, without speaking to members of this particular group, you don't know what the story is saying, right? So you don't know the actual meaning. You don't know what you're putting on your sofa or on your bed, right? It's just been reduced to an interesting ethnic accessory, right? So by helping those people, tell the world what those prints actually mean, what each scratch, each symbol actually is telling a story, a personal story, or a tribal story, or a community story, then fosters some knowledge and understanding for those who are looking at purchasing, and it may stop them from purchasing, right? You might not want this particular story on your bed or in your house. You don't know what, if you don't know what it's saying. um, and also gives them a way to communicate beyond their local communities. So that's something that is really near and dear to our hearts, is getting people involved, giving them a voice in what's going on, and not being kind of an afterthought, or kind of a cute thing to have around as a spectacle.
And I think also in the line of this as well, it's like, underlying all of this is really this core around just general entrepreneurship and what it means to be a business owner versus working in a business or organization. And Conroy, I think, as a Indigenous entrepreneur, right? Because you mentioned you're not only in one business, you have multiple business ventures. There's a mindset that goes with entrepreneurship, right? What can you tell us about how that is in Canada, Indigenous entrepreneurship? Are there any key points to discuss here around how Indigenous communities can move forward in the business world?
I think, yeah, I have a lot to say about that actually. Um, so one of the problems that we face here in Canada, and I think this is pretty much across North America, when we look at how Indigenous communities interact with each other. A lot of us are very proud of who we are. So, for instance, right now I'm in the Blackfoot Confederacy.
Mm.
This is their territory. It's been for thousands of years. Where I'm from is the Cree territory, and both people are very proud. But what happens is there's this reluctancy to work together because it's like, well, we do things the Cree way and we do things the Blackfoot way. So we're not going to do things the way you do things. So I think in terms of entrepreneurship, uh, we really need to work on uniting
Mm.
because we have a really huge advantage in this country. Um, so when you have an Indigenous business and it's on Indigenous land, and you do business with other Indigenous businesses from other communities, it's tax free. And so that is like a huge benefit. So I think there needs to be more of a push for us to be inspiring the youth to start businesses in technology. We can have tech hubs right on the reserve that service other reserves. And then we're keeping that money all for our sovereign nations. It's staying within us. Uh, but the common thing is you go to school, you get a job, and you go out into the city and you make money there, and maybe you come home. I think that we really need to inspire the youth, like all of them. We really should be changing the way we do schooling on the reserve. There should be a big portion that is dedicated to entrepreneurship because we want all these youth to start businesses, start agricultural farming where they're going to sell their products to other First Nations, you know, um, in terms of like data hubs or, we can start all kinds of things on our nation and work with other nations. They have a need, we'll supply that need. There's so in Canada, there's British Columbia, they have a lot of lumber. And a lot of the First Nations, they own a lot of those forests where they get the lumber from. Essentially it's like, hey, you're a young businessman. It's like, you know what? I know this nation that's in Winnipeg or in Saskatchewan, they need a lot of lumber because they're going to be building X amount of houses. Why am I not just making business with them? So I'm going to ship directly to them. So now I don't have to pay taxes on this because I'm doing work from nation to nation. And so it's a huge advantage. And I just really don't think a lot of our Indigenous leaders really understand that that's something we should be using to our advantage. Making a whole ton of young entrepreneurs that are all business minded and starting these huge corporations and businesses, and we all work together and we service each other because we're essentially all little sovereign nations. And we look at like the world economy that works on everybody servicing different nations. And so I think that we should adopt that kind of mindset in terms of business. And we can't do that without implementing today's technologies.
And I
Like
think, oh yes,
Natasha,
go ahead.
yeah, Natasha, I talked to you before about using like holographic technology,
Hmm.
using 3D technology. How do we use that to educate the youth and to have different programs? All of these things we do need to implement on First Nations land. And then once we do that, we can start reaching out to, nations in America, nations in the Caribbean, to all of our Indigenous brothers and sisters. Because it's important for us to be proud of who we are and where we come from. But it's also important that we need to start realizing that we can become an economic powerhouse if we start to work together.
And I think that's really, really important. And I think one of the larger challenges that we see a lot is just dealing in it also in certain communities is the tech. It's kind of like in these tech deserts without infrastructure. Infrastructure is a big part of being able to um, adapt and leverage some of these technologies. You've kind of discussed how some of these efforts in the business side and the use in technology as a business owner tie into kind of these larger community efforts, the education, the mentorship, the awareness. What's your general kind of outlook for the future, even beyond what you're doing right now in the business? What do you want to tell other people who are listening today, even the youth, um, with technology? What should they be trying to do or thinking about?
Well, technology is our friend. I don't know about AI, but you know. But technology really is our friend. And if you learn how to use technology as your servant and not your master, you do well. So one of the things that I can do, I don't always work on site, but when I'm working on site, it's like mindless stuff. Like, I can do this stuff with my eyes closed. So I'll listen to an audiobook. you know, anything I want to learn. So I'm doubling up. I'm completing a project, but I'm also filling my mind.
I like,
Any topic I want to learn,
I
right?
like the idea of filling your mind and thinking
Yes.
about a future where you're helping others to learn how to do the same, or at least learn to like doing the same. Now, Natasha asked you about the future, your future outlook. What about for your nation? What are you thinking about?
Mhm.
For my nation,
Mm.
um, I think the biggest thing for my nation is I want us to really adapt to today's technologies and to learn how to live in the modern world. Because sometimes what we can do is we have people on a nation who are training the youth, but they're training them based on what they've learned, and maybe they've only lived on a nation. Now, in terms of spirituality, that's the way it should be done. But if someone is going to prepare you to run a business,
Hmm.
um, they need to really learn how to use technology and to change the mindset. Because one of the things we have on some nations um, is this poverty mindset.
Mm.
You know
Can you
that there's
tell us a
not a
little bit about this mindset?
Mhm.
yeah. So basically, in the poverty mindset, you're raised in poverty. So whenever you get income, you feel like it's a hot potato.
Mm-hmm.
It's
I
got to
guess
go.
we'll
It's got to go.
spend it.
Yeah, yeah. You got to spend it. You got to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's hot potato, hot potato. Because you might not have this chance again. And then another thing is, um, you see somebody else who's successful. You feel like they've taken all the wealth,
Mm-hmm.
all that is available, all the resources, not understanding that there's vast amounts of resources.
Mm-hmm.
But all you can see in front of you is just like what this one person has got, and you feel like there's not enough to go around. So maybe you'll make that person's life harder,
Mm-hmm.
or try to take some of their resources for yourself instead of just opening your eyes and seeing there's much things around.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful way or thought to close out our session today. Just, I guess, not falling victim to this poverty mindset that, even in the three of us today talking, there's a wealth of opportunities out there for Native and Indigenous peoples around the world. And we just collectively put our heads together, we can share and grow our communities to unfathomable, you know, dimensions and reach. So I want to thank you very much for coming on and giving
But
us.
can I say one more thing? I like the land. If these lands could talk initiative,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it can go so much further.
Mm.
And here's how. Um, I think there should be a big component on uniting all of our nations.
Mm.
We call this Turtle Island. Even the Caribbeans is essentially a part of Turtle Island
Mm-hmm.
because it's the tail of the turtle.
Mm.
And, when we start to come together like we are today, we're all from different nations and literally like across the whole country, right? I think having the conversations and inspiring each other is going to be one of the things that helps to empower our people
Mm.
because we can't go back to the way things used to be. We would love to, but we have to find a way to use today's technologies, mix them with some of our traditions so that we have a proper way forward.
Mm.
And having these kind of platforms for Indigenous professionals to talk and to express themselves and to inspire and to learn about tech
Mm.
is important.
Yeah, that's a much better closing.
Yeah. Well, Conroy, that it's a pleasure, and thank you so much, or home, as we say in Taino. Thank you very much, and for everyone that was able to attend today. We look forward to sharing this talk again. So this will be on a replay for those who are didn't get to sit in today. And we look forward to seeing you next time and hearing about all the great things that you do in the world of Indigenous business.
Thank you so much. And Marcia, you're my Indigenous sister. Never forget that.
Yes. Oh,
Okay.
Thank you all.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.